You're listening to the Two Act Podcast. I'm your co host, Adi, and I'm joined by.
Gothjon.
All right, welcome back. So today we're going to dive into a recommendation that I've picked. It's a psychological thriller that came out in 2023. It's called Red Rooms, or also alternatively known as Le Chambre Rouge. It's a film directed by Pascal Plan, and it's a super under the radar indie film that came out in its festival run in 2023, and I think it just released last year. Um, it's a really fascinating movie. I'm going to give you a bit of a plot introduction before we can jump into opening thoughts. So, film takes us inside the trial of Ludovic Cavalier, a serial killer facing justice for murdering three teenage girls in Canada. But this isn't your typical serial killer thriller. While Cavalier's gruesome crimes, recording the killings and selling them as snuff films on the dark web's infamous Red Rooms, set the stage, the story isn't really about him. Instead, it's a deep dive into the minds of true crime obsessives and serial killer groupies who flock to his trial. At the heart of the film is Callion, played by Juliette Garapi, a model by day whose fascination with Cavalier veers into a disturbing parasocial obsession. We'll follow her descent into some truly dark territory as the story unfolds. Then there's Clementine, portrayed by Laurie Bobbin, another groupie who brings a contrasting energy to the mix. The dynamic between these two superfans, each a flavor of fixation, in one of the film's standout elements. Director Pascal Plan does something really compelling with these characters, and we'll unpack how their differences drive the narrative later in the episode. So, with that being said, I'm just gonna go straight off the bat. What did you think of the film, John? Really curious to know your opinions.
Okay. So my first thought was, shit. There goes Adi expanding my horizons again with the French thing, but this time it's in America's hat. Canada in Quebec. Yeah, it's French Canadian courtrooms make you wear funny outfits. I thought that was interesting. Not really familiar with Quebec court, so that was kind of intriguing. That was my first thought. They got funny outfits.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It starts off as a courtroom drama, and then it just veers into something more and more disturbing, and just gets lost into the rabbit hole of true crime obsession, which I think is so. It's so prescient with today and the age of society and technology that we live in. I think there's something really wrong with the way we consume media, and I really feel like this film kind of sparked something in me with the way technology and true crime and the parasocial relationship we have with these two goes so hand in hand. And I think this film, it starts off as kind of like your, I wouldn't say average, but kind of like one of those serial killer dramas where you expect everything to be about the murderer. And
Like it's a
to be
documentary.
like it is a documentary. I mean, even though the events of the film is strictly, purely speaking, fictional, but it starts off in such a realistic docudrama sort of way. There's this long 20-minute sequence in the court where the trial begins. You're introduced to the protagonist who walks into the court to watch the trial, Callian, portrayed by Juliette Garapi, who's fucking phenomenal in this. I think she has incredible striking presence. And then you're introduced to the images of these three young teenage girls who've been brutally killed, and their bodies have been dismembered by the accused Cavalier. and you get to see the lawyers, the prosecutor and the defendant argue and set up their case to the jury. I think there was a line in one of the opening scenes where the prosecutor goes and says to the jury, I apologize for what I will be inflicting upon you. And I choose the word inflicting because no one should be able to go through something like this, especially the dehumanization of what you're about to see in the evidence. And I think that is so strikingly true to some regard to what this film is about, because it starts off about this case and this serial killer who's being trialed, and then it gets into this protagonist character, and we're slowly going into descending into her life and seeing how truly obsessed she is with this. So
Mhm.
what did you think of the whole opening, like apart from the Quebec
Um,
stuff?
I was intrigued, but I don't think the court scenes at the start, I don't think they do enough to like enthrall you in the story. If anything, it becomes kind of like muted and very like mundane. And you're just like,
Yeah.
they're just going off at a matter of fact of all these facts and all these what exactly happened. And as a viewer, you're led to believe at the beginning that maybe he didn't necessarily do it just because of how well a lawyer is arguing, like they're oh well, you couldn't see the rest of his face or something like that. It kind of gives you like
Yeah.
that doubt, and then
He
you're
goes to one of the
wondering,
jury members and he's like, "You could be the
"Mhm,
one. You fit
you
the
could have
description."
been him. You have the same description. There's 30,000 people in Quebec that have that same description. It's just like, okay. Yeah, when they're talking about like the dark web stuff, I was really hoping that they nailed it, and for the most part, they did. Because I personally understand how you can access the dark web and all that, and I did think it was funny that in French there's no French equivalent to dark web or deep web. Um, I was really hoping the film writer understood like that, how you access it and stuff like that. And I would have been completely taken out of the story, and I would have rolled my eyes so freaking hard if they didn't explain anything about like the Tor browser. Just as a
Yeah,
scriptwriter, I was like,
absolutely.
so thankful. Not necessarily like I'm hanging out there, but I have a layman's understanding of it.
Now, I'm glad you brought that point up because I think the dark web is often represented in media as, like, at least in pop culture, as this sort of source where shady people go through, but nobody
Right,
really
it's the
knows how to get at it.
boogeyman.
But the truth is, it exists. It is real. And believe it or not, it is kind of messed up in a deeply crazy way that you can access and bid
Mhm.
and auction
Yeah.
things that are absolutely fucking insane. You can
Yep,
hire.
there was a whole documentary about the Silk Road and how a guy basically sold not only firearms but illicit substances and even like a tiger. There was like a
uh,
wild animal that was for sale, but you could buy it with cryptocurrency like Bitcoin.
Wow. Yep. That is again
Yeah.
another element to the whole dark web is cryptocurrency
Mhm.
because it's untraceable to an extent. But
All right.
I think that being said, uh, I you're right, and this film is actually really well researched by the
Mhm.
filmmakers. I think they
Mhm.
they do a good job in really setting up what the story is about. And you're right, it is really slow paced at the beginning.
Mhm.
Like the whole court scene takes up almost a quarter of the first 45
Right.
minutes,
This
uh,
movie's almost 2 hours, and
almost 2 hours. But I think it's important. It's important because it sets up the scene. I really like the way they shot those scenes in that opening because it's really kind of like creating this almost effect of discombobulation. You're kind of feeling, in some ways, not sure and not aware of what's happening. And then it's really like honing you on it. And the way the camera pans slowly from the prosecutor's face to Ludovic, the killer's face, and then slowly, finally, to the protagonist's face. And you're just seeing her blank face in a way, staring at what's happening. And you're kind of
Mhm.
in a sort of sense of like trance like state, trying to understand what's happening.
Right.
Um, but then it really gets closer and closer to Kellyanne, and we kind of see that she's sleeping on the road to go to this trial, which is fucking
Which
weird.
at first was, yeah, extremely confusing. I think it was because she was trying to make sure she got a seat in the court because she isn't a part of the court.
But that kind of is fucked up because it kind of shows that this whole thing feels like a gig, right? The
Right.
people want to queue and watch it because they're. I mean, I don't want to say people are amused by it,
Mhm.
but I do think that it is a critique on true crime obsession today
Yeah.
because look, let's face it, ever since social media, Netflix, not to single out Netflix, but there's this whole rise and boom of true crime dramas,
Right.
docudramas, and
Oh
everything
yeah, there's a
surrounding
dime a dozen.
dime a dozen about everything, and the way that it's sparked internet sleuths,
Mhm.
people who think that they can solve crimes on TikTok,
On
uh,
4chan.
on 4chan, on Reddit, whatever. And I think that it's messed up that you can actually people have access to the information so
Yeah.
easily,
For
right?
all
I mean,
the evil that 4chan has done, and they have done some good. They have solved some crimes. They have been able to, look at really close at the pixels and figure it out.
they
Uh,
have, and I think like what happens with Kellyanne, I don't think I can see her as a hero. I don't think she's acting in the form of justice in any way, and I think that's what really hooked me about the way Plant made this character. It's really a true depiction on how uh, her parasocial obsession really kind of disassociates her to humanity in a way. The fact that she can just like take the scalpel and go through something so crazy, like it's just another video, like she's watching everything that's happening in this trial, and you're kind of left early on in the mystery thinking, is she connected by some way? She, somewhat got any links with the victims or with the parents or with the killer? Why is she there? Why is she so insistent on being there every time the court is on trial in session? But that being said, I mean, just when you think that her obsession's weird, we come across another character called Clementine, who also happens to be present in the court session with Kellyanne, and she's just a fucking deranged groupie, isn't she?
the first second I saw her talking to the reporters, I rolled my eyes so fucking hard. I was like, "Oh, please just be a one-off. Please be just a one-off. I don't want to see you the rest in the movie. Please never come back." But she kind of grew on me.
She kind of grew on you in a
she,
way, which is
she, I kind of thought of her as like a normie, I guess, for lack of a better term. Um, and like Kellyanne is somebody that is very internet savvy and well averse to um, just like the dark side of the internet.
it's interesting because Clementine comes off as straight off she's a groupie. She
Mhm.
admires Ludovic. We don't know what it is that draws her to him, but she's just there to defend him. She
Mhm.
thinks, you know, plausible deniability that the person behind the mask in the video is not him. It could be photoshopped. I think that's a good point.
Right.
A good sort of counter argument to like again technology and what evidence can change. But you just know straight off that she's kind of deranged to think that.
Oh yeah.
And her obsession is quite questionable. But it's interesting how she grows on you more as a character as this progresses, because you think, oh, yeah, she's the loose nut here. But then you look at what that contrast brings out when Kellyanne's obsession goes off,
Mhm.
and you see, no, she's way more crazier by the end of it. So I
Yeah,
think like
in
their
her own way.
relationship, in her own way, obviously, but their relationship is interesting because like Clementine is obviously pro Ludovic, like deeply feels really strongly about how he's been represented in the media. I mean, there's even a scene where she confronts one of the talk show hosts that are slating him, and then obviously she's going to be pointed out as the insane one for that.
Right.
But I think what's interesting is Kellyanne is her dynamic with Kellyanne is fascinating because I didn't see them actually becoming somewhat of friends in a way.
Because they're
Somewhat
kind of
they're kind of
opposites, how she's like going a mile a minute and Kellyanne's more reserved.
yeah. Kellyanne is super reserved, super detached,
Mhm.
and that obviously flips in the end, which I think is ironic
Mhm.
about her character. But it starts off as to paint a description of Kellyanne. Let's face it, she's really beautiful. She's
Yep.
pretty. She's a model. Turns out
Mhm.
she lives in one of the high-rise residences in Quebec and
Which
Montreal. And
makes you question why she's sleeping on the street.
exactly, that's so off-putting, right? I mean, it makes no
It's like, what the
sense.
fuck?
Why would someone in the cold of Canada and
Yeah, Canada's
winter?
fucking cold.
Yeah, why would you sleep on the road for this thing? Like it makes you're well off. You live in a fancy flat, and what's interesting is like turns out she's not just a, a, a successful model who's modeling and making her income through fashion, but she's actually really tech savvy. She's developed her own AI, and she's pretty good at gambling. She's good at
Right.
poker.
Poker.
I think that
Played a
sets
lot
up,
of Balatro.
and that's been set up really well in the opening in a scene between the two, Clementine and Kellyanne, where they're having lunch. And while Clementine's yapping, she's casually playing poker, and she hands her the lunch money and says, "Yeah, I just won that playing poker." And Clementine's like, "You must be good." And he's like, "Yeah, well, you got to be. I'm paraphrasing here, but you got to be detached. You can't let emotions get the better of you. You
Right.
gotta you
And in
gotta
fact,
drive
you
the
take
emotions out of."
advantage of them if you
Exactly.
find out somebody's emotional.
Exactly, and that's how you win. And I'm just good with numbers. So it kind of sets her up as this really high IQ, maybe
Yeah,
super intelligent
she
person.
might be a sociopath.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Her reactions are really eerie. And I want
Yeah.
to say the thing about this film is it does not have any visible gore or violence on screen,
Mhm.
but it still disturbed and creeped me the fuck out. Unlike
Yep.
most films that I've encountered in recent memory that do the
Right.
opposite. Yeah,
Will
they
be
don't
like a
actually.
festival of blood.
It could be, and I think what's interesting is like a lot of other films could just easily, involve a couple of scenes and ruin the whole thing.
Right.
But the fact that this threads the needle so tight to the edge kept me on the edge of my seat.
Mm.
I wanted to know what the hell was going to happen, and I think the second half of it really blew me away more than the first half. The
Yeah.
first half is obviously a lot more slower and set up.
Mhm.
Uh, but what do you think of the whole cyber stalking?
Um, it was interesting that she became so obsessed just to and then she was even using the dark web to find that poor lady's information so she could log into it and check her emails.
Yeah,
Like,
the
and
victim's father.
the one thing that really put me off was that she supposedly designed an AI that was like
Yeah,
the if you were that tech
unpenetrable.
savvy, no matter what, you would not bug your house. There's a reason why tech CEOs put tape over their cameras because they know that they can be accessed. That's it's if you're so smart, you're stupid.
Well, that bit is kind of like, it is end of the
Even
day
Clementines, like,
fictional.
why would you bug your house? Aren't they always listening?
True. I mean, I think it does. It's kind of interesting to me because again, it has AI in it, right? The
Yeah,
fact that the
I did
AI,
like that it responded to only English. I thought that was pretty funny.
yeah, it was. She's developed this intelligent AI that's kind of protected from the Google or data collecting servers
All right.
of all these other companies and is completely impenetrable as she claims,
Mm,
but is somewhat intelligent enough. And I think it's interesting because we live in a world now where AI is increasingly prevalent.
yeah.
And
And
I
we got
think that
cameras everywhere. It's only gonna get worse.
it's only gonna get worse. And the fact that it plays, I would like to argue that it does play somewhat of a role in this film
Mhm,
thematically, with the idea of technology, with the idea of how uh how our relationship with engaging with technology has changed, and how true crime, you got high profile celebrity deaths or
mhm,
murder cases, and everything goes viral, right?
right,
Within hours or minutes, you can see, if not news, but there's
all right.
leaks
And there's
on
gonna
the
be
internet.
memes. Yep.
There's going to be a lot of things, and it's disturbing to what extent that we're consuming this without really realizing that we're falling deep into that consumption, right? We're not
Mhm,
acknowledging how unhealthy it can be or how unethical it is. Like, I don't want to get too political, but the, the CEO serial killer, right? Not a serial
right.
killer, but the killer.
Yep.
Uh, Strong reactions from both sides. Social
Mhm.
media completely opposite.
Yep.
Government completely opposite. I mean,
Yep.
it's
The
something.
government trying to shut it down, trying not to make him a martyr.
Exactly, and I think again, it's increasingly interesting to see how people are strongly, the anonymity of the internet has changed how we behave
Mhm,
with the events that occur in our world. And the fact that the film primarily talks about the dark web in a way that it exists, and it is obviously quite fucked up that the third video of the third girl is still missing,
mhm,
right? So they uncovered the bodies of the three victims in
mhm.
his uh in one of his places, and that's how they traced it back to him, and then they found the two videos, which is quite it was quite disturbing, right? What did you think of the whole thing? Like, I mean, like I said, a normal film would have shown you maybe a scene or
Yeah,
two.
it would have went full saw. It would have been a saw trap. Yeah, it's I did like the show more by not showing. I did like that. I've seen enough fucked up shit in whether or not it's in film or it's in real life. You know, there was a whole many years where live leak was just like the thing that kids would show each other to try to freak each other out, and you'd end up watching a bunch of crazy Taliban videos, and then people just being hacked off at the head. And I'm glad it didn't show that because I've seen enough of that fuck shit to last a lifetime. I'm glad that it
Yeah,
wasn't even depicted. I appreciated that. It just the red hues, I liked a lot of that, like the color correction, just like showing her
yeah.
become
A
completely
lot of her
detached.
reflection,
Yeah.
a lot of her eyes reflect
Yeah.
her watching the screens.
Hmm.
Even another thing I found really odd about her character, I don't know if this could be a bit of an observation here, but
Mm,
the fact that uh, her fancy flat or apartment, she has no lights on apart from this coming out from the screens.
The computer screen.
And for most amount of time, she's completely dark, and she's kind of reminding me of like Patrick Bateman vibes,
Yeah, I can
like
see that.
the fact that she's working out aggressively while watching workout videos, and it's kind of her way of like letting loose in a way at
As
home.
long as she doesn't start talking about Harry Lewis, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, that's Paul Allen's record.
Yeah,
And then it got me on the edge thinking there's a scene where she bumps into Clementine on the street,
Mhm.
and she looks at her after talking to her, and Clementine's like, "Yeah, I'm living at the homeless shelter. I'm still around." She looks at her while Clementine leaves, and I thought she was gonna kill her. I don't know why, but she had such a dead stare.
Right.
I thought when she invited Clementine over to
Mhm.
her place, I thought this is not gonna end well.
Right.
I don't know why. I can't say logically why, but I just had a feeling that something feels off about this. Like, why is she
Right.
like, and why is she getting close to her? Why would she want to, entertain her? And then you kind of
Mhm.
see them interacting a bit and forming a bit of a friendship in a way. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's
Over
even a
pizza.
friend or a pizza. And then they play squash. Uh, it's funny,
Yeah, it was
but
pretty interesting.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought
Yeah,
at that
I didn't
moment.
know what to think until like when that scene cuts because there isn't anything like indicating that she was going to invite her over, but I was like, oh, she's actually she has compassion. This is strange
Yeah.
because she hides it. Like now this is a thing just in general, at least in American culture, where men don't really show emotions. I see a lot of traits that she's showing that men in America show, where you don't show emotion, you don't cry, you don't show weakness, because if you show weakness, other people will take advantage of it. And it's sad, but it's just a matter of the fact. And she shows a lot of that, just a lot of and not trying to think with your heart, trying to think with your like literal thought process. And I was thought it was strange how she would cut that off, just to be a little compassionate for somebody that's sleeping on the street.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it
And
was odd.
I even thought it was even more odd when she put on the blonde wig.
Ooh, that's the bit that really creeped me the fuck out. That
So,
whole scene. So, just for context sake, what happens is after Clementine finds out that Kellyanne has access to the two videos that have been found by the FBI or whatever, uh, and watches the video, and that's where you see Clementine break, right, as a
yep.
character, completely break. She realizes she's so wrong, and
Mhm.
she's so deluded, and
Mhm.
this case is so fucked up that she has no right to like be part of this environment and think that she can be a groupie or whatever and have an opinion.
Mhm.
It drives her away literally. Like, she
Mhm.
leaves, and she just completely cancels out anything to do with Kellyanne. She thinks Kellyanne's insane, right? For
Right.
having that. And I think that's the first sign where you see, oh wait, this is not normal, right? I mean, of course we've seen something so far with the person's lifestyle that feels oddly artificial, but this is like the telltale sign that something is really off. But it doesn't hit that note until she puts on the blonde wig, puts on the blue contact lenses,
Yep.
puts on the same uniform as the victim's school
He
uniform,
he even puts in it was like a retainer.
racist
Yeah.
retainer, yeah,
Yep.
a retainer, absolutely.
Yep.
And she goes in the court, and she's like drawing people's attention
Yeah,
to
and
the
she
point
makes
where
the mom cry.
the mom is visibly shook and upset because obviously, I mean, who wouldn't in that position be traumatized by something like that. I mean, it's literally, it's, I don't know what it comes off as it comes off as a bad prank, right? I mean,
Right.
why would anyone want to do something like that? I mean, what are you gonna get out of it? But the bit that really creeped me out, including the soundtrack, which is, the film is scored by the director's brother, who I think does a phenomenal job.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Uh,
no, it was a banger.
it was a banger, but that scene where she makes eye contact with the serial killer and the
He
guy
waves.
waves. Oh
Oh,
my
fuck.
god! I was so chilled.
That was the second I knew he did it. Because
So you still doubted
there's
it?
I still doubted it because who knows? It's the court of law. Well, whether or not he did it,
Innocent,
whether or not he'd be
innocent until
proved.
proven guilty, right?
Exactly. That's a thing in the States as well. It's you always have to give him the benefit of the doubt because it doesn't matter what the real thing happened because it's how the courts are going to argue it. So whether or not somebody did something heinous or illegal, the lawyers will argue it in such a way. And if you have a jury, that's you're appealing to emotions like big time. It's like a whole thing of beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah,
So and how that's structured is you have like different levels of reasonable doubt in different countries.
yeah.
And there's a lot of things like with like the video evidence, like of course that can be doctored. Um, in fact, that even like exists is very peculiar. It sounded like they were like streaming it to like a live audience, which
It
doesn't
was
make a
so
yeah.
he was auctioning or streaming it to a live bidding audience,
Yeah.
who paid to see that live, and that itself is pretty
Yeah,
creepy
I
and
was
messed.
a bit confused about that because from what I understand about I don't know if it's changed, but because of like the internet speeds, so like how the Tor browser works is it connects to a bunch of servers that aren't connected to the main internet, and because of that, the speeds are astronomically slow. Like if you try to like download something, it takes like literally forever. Like something
Right.
you would take that's why so like the bit rate for like streaming it doesn't really seem feasible, but I've been out of the dark web game for a while, so maybe that's
Oh,
changed.
you mean to say you've accessed?
Oh, of course. You gotta
Ah,
look up at those crazy fake internet
holy
documents of the federal
wow!
government doesn't want you to know. There was a time that I was very intrigued, and then
How long ago was this?
maybe like 10, 15 years ago. I
Wow.
was very
I can only
curious.
assume it's massively changed since.
Yeah, I don't want to go anymore. It's I don't want to not unsee things. But the thing is, you have to know like where web addresses are, and they're all in .onion, and
Right.
there'll be like entire wikis of like showing you like how to make a bomb or something crazy like that, and you're like, oh my god, I need to not be on here.
No, it's frightening. The
Yeah,
thought of it
no,
is
it's
scary. I mean,
right. And then there's also cops on there. There's
yeah,
the FBI is on there all the time. They're
they
always trying
themselves are
to
hackers to be able to retrieve that
ex-
sort of
yeah,
evidence.
they're trying to fish information from you, whether it's, your face or it's your IP address or it's something like that. Because there are certain like things on the Tor browser where they tell you don't do these things. Don't do this thing. Don't enable cookies because they can extrapolate data from you and they can figure out where you're at. Don't
Yep.
enable cookies on these websites. And like there's well like website games where you like just like click and like try to like figure out it's like an ARG. There's like all
Mhm.
sorts of interesting things on there. That's why I was interested.
Right. So it did you did find it really like it was new information in a way to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
how
it was
it was depicted.
very curious. Like there is a lot of like illegal things on there, and of course I'm not going anywhere near that because that just sounds like trouble. I'm not
Right.
watching a snuff film. Why would I have horror films. I could just watch that.
Well, I mean,
You
it could
can't
just be
unsee
sad.
that shit. That's the thing.
No. No, 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 you can't, and, but the fact is, people do see that, and
Right. Well, that's
they get a kick out of
curiosity
it.
kills the cat.
I mean, Kellyanne obviously got a kick out of it, right? I
Right.
mean, she has no relations or ties with the victims
Thank
or the
God.
serial killer, or the serial killer, right? I'm
Right.
glad the film.
Didn't
I'm
go
glad
that
the
route.
film did that and didn't go that route,
Mhm.
because I would kind of, obviously, I wouldn't say water down, but it would kind of take away the message from what we're getting at.
Mhm.
But the fact that this random person who's somewhat peculiarly obsessed and, falls down this rabbit hole of trying to uncover what's happening, and
Yep.
it's crazy because, like, it's one thing to be obsessed with a case like that, and it's another to have access to data or information or evidence that the case itself may not have. And I think that's kind of messed up power play control. Um, and the whole bit where she's like verifying herself, like that sequence where she has to, like, yeah,
Like a
she has
selfie. Yeah,
like a selfie, write her
that's a
down.
total 4chan thing. You put a shoe on your head to prove you're not a bot.
Yeah, yeah, and then you're real, and then the bit where she was getting, like, was she getting stalked? It was super
Yeah, that
creepy.
was very peculiar.
It was super creepy. I felt like, well, are we gonna see an abduction?
Oh,
It's like
yeah,
a
when
van,
you start cruising the dark web, you kind of get paranoid like that too. I understand that.
and I do feel that the film perfectly captured that sense of building paranoia.
Mhm.
That
You hear
she
sirens
knows,
and you have to like log off your computer. You're like real quick.
yeah, they're sailing a bit too close to what's happening, and
Mhm.
you might get webbed into the trap.
All
But
right. No matter how good of a hacker you seem to be, you can hack the Gibson.
she doesn't really come across as a hacker, does she?
No, no, no. She seems more like as a script kiddie, like somebody that just understands how to access things.
Would you call her an internet sleuth?
Um, no. I would call her
She's
she's
insane though, right?
yeah, well, either that or she's a sociopath.
Sociopath.
This is
She's a
straight up
sociopath.
because she has a lot of qualities of one, a lot of detachment, a lot of emotionless. Uh, but I'm happy that she did the right thing at the end.
But that's what I don't think.
Understand like why she
I,
did it.
I no, I can see why she did it, obviously. But I don't see her in that light as her acting out as this savior or this person
Right.
who's doing right. I think it is really complicated. Um, and I think this is the scene that brilliantly, for me, had me edge of my seat, and it kind of perfectly showed how sickening. I mean, the filmmaker here is a genius for this scene. So
Mhm.
we're set in the auction, right? The
Mhm.
final half of the film. They're auctioning the third video of the third victim on the
Scam me.
dark web, which is verified, and it's obviously cryptocurrency bidding, right? Bitcoin, and she's playing poker while the auction's going off, while the bidding war is happening, and she manages to get the currency to bid by winning a crazy hand at the last second. And the fucked up part is you're actually kind of rooting for her to win, right? It's like you're looking at her intensely trying to win, and you kind of like. I think that's the beauty of, like, storytelling, right? No matter
Mhm.
what character you see, obviously some are bad, some are good, but we've seen plenty of films that show a protagonist who's not necessarily morally correct or right, but you still kind of root for them,
Right.
right? Being a bad guy or being a bad person in a way. And I think it puts you in that uncomfortable spot where you're like seeing her try really hard to win this bid. And then you realize she's doing this because she wants to win, the video. She wants to get access.
Right.
And that's the troubling part.
Right.
That's the deeply disturbing part.
And
The
that was
fact
a
that,
shitload of money too. It was like an astronomical amount of money.
do you know how much it was? Because I'm kind of out of the.
Lately I don't know the price of Bitcoin, but it has fluctuated between like 100,000 per Bitcoin per to like 80 to like 60. So each one of those coins, so she did 20. So if like
21.5, I believe.
exactly like an absurd, dumb, silly amount of money for that video.
I think that comes across. I think that comes across to $83,000, which is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, any amount like once you start dealing with whole bitcoins, you're already out of the realm of like a rational amount of money.
And the fucked up bit that really got a bit of a reaction out of me was when one of the bidders who's close to bidding with her says, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna watch the leak." I
Yep.
was like, "Damn!" Like this just shows how messed up this is because obviously
Yep.
it's expected whoever's gonna get access to this is gonna leak it, right, and make the
Right.
whole world see it or whatever, send a message or whatever. So I thought that was it was interesting just to see how, even though we're watching a film where nothing really happens, let's face it, but we're so enthralled by what's happening within. It's
Mm,
kind of scary. It's kind of eerie. I felt spooked out. You know, I
okay.
don't know if you felt spooked out. I
No.
know you're the horror connoisseur, but it kind of weirded me out a lot. Like I just felt disturbed by the whole thing. And then when she watches the film, this is the bit that I think something about the performance, which I wanted to talk to you talk about next. Is like you're
Mm,
watching her reaction, watching the video, but there's no real visible reaction beyond maybe a bit of a teary eye,
yep.
um,
Curiosity. What did she spend all that money
curiosity,
for? Yep.
and the thing is, like, you're seeing that, but it's like it's not a real human reaction. It's kind of like the reaction of of a dead person in a way.
Mm.
It doesn't come across as humane.
Well,
And
I think she's at the point where once you've seen enough fucked shit on the internet, it doesn't phase you
yeah,
because
she's so
you've
desensitized.
desensitized. Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. It's kind of like so like for instance if somebody hears somebody throw up or something like that, a normal reaction is to have a gag reflex.
Yep.
Um like if you're watching a film and somebody throws up or random, you're just like
Oh, yeah.
it's normal to have that. Once you become desensitized to something like that, you can watch the
Yep.
worst of the worst and not even bat an eye because it's just this is just a matter of fact. This is normal. And
Take healthcare workers, right? They mean they must see like,
exactly, they see horror scenes every day that are real life,
yep,
and
and
because
they go back
it
to
they can
the.
only help those people if they don't react and they don't. It's kind of like so. For instance, when I was a child, I dropped a glass and it gave me a scar above my eye, and my mother learned to not react because that would only help me if she didn't freak out.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same thing,
It's the same thing except the cause is more fucked up and perverse,
of
right?
course.
It's unethical
Right,
and you know, it's one thing to be desensitized because you're a healthcare worker and your job is to save lives,
right.
but it's another if you're doing this out of a grotesque pleasure or a kick or a curiosity
Mm.
that's so high that it consumes you, and to the point where you're kind of losing yourself into this whole thing. I mean, her paranoia reaches the point where she destroys this AI that she's created, the chip, puts it in her blender and like just lets it rip.
Mhm,
I thought that was interesting because again,
mhm.
AI is there subtextually as
Right.
a presence, which again, I do want to commend the writing in this film. I think it's incredible what they've achieved with. This is an indie movie, by the way. This is not a
Mm.
studio movie. Yeah, it's independent production. Um, and for them to have such nuanced screenplay met by some really good directing work, and the performances for me was like, I mean, the protagonist was incredible. The actor was incredible, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of the whole? I mean, I don't think this is an easy role to play by any means.
No. Yeah, did not have an issue with the acting at all. I had more issue just with like certain scenes that I necessarily don't feel like that helped me, but that's just because that's how I feel. And then a lot of the there's you watching this movie, you have a lot of questions. And then once you have those questions answered, then you have even more questions.
Yeah, and then let's not forget that after she watches this third video that she attains through illegal means, she takes it to another level. She
It's another crime.
again, she commits another crime. She breaks into the victim's parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she gets access to their locks.
Yeah, sits in the kid's bed.
Takes a selfie. You
Yeah,
know, wearing
what the fuck?
that whole scene where she's going up to that tree where the memorial is with the photo, and then it's getting dark. That was like a horror movie scene. You know, it was so spooky, for me at least, because I know spooky because I'll tell you why. Because I know nothing supernatural is going to happen, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the entire act of it all is so wrong and weird, and it just derived such a disturbing reaction. Uh, I just felt chilled, and then her behavior in that scene as well. You know, taking a selfie. Why? You know, and let's not forget, while this is happening, she loses her career is down the drain, right? Because after that whole act that she pulls off in court with the wig and the lens,
Mm-hmm.
her agency drops her, right? Like her career is done. Like this is crossed the point where it goes completely against what her rationale was earlier in the film, where she says, "You don't let emotions get the better of you," right? Where
Right.
you exploit the person with the emotions. And here you can clearly see that she loses that sight line of sight completely. She's completely consumed into that, and I think it was a really fitting sort of reaction, and to see that, you know, to see that sort of change into her being this person completely consumed was, I think it was very fitting for sure, and
Mm.
I think it says a lot about society today, and hopefully, who even knows? I mean, it's to me, to be honest, when I see this is just a representation of one character, who even knows how people are actually obsessed, right? Secretly. Because on the street, if you look at her as a person, this character, she comes off as, you know, a normal person, doesn't she? I mean, there's nothing visibly something you can strikingly say, oh yeah, this person's behavior is off. I mean, she can socialize, she's being interviewed by journalists, you know, her job is fashion, popular, but
Alternative.
alternative, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she's attractive, but
Right. No, I agree.
but there's nothing glaringly off-putting about this,
Mm-hmm.
about her, right? There's no red herring here
No, she
until you
gets.
get a peek into her inside life, and you see, oh my god, this is insane. Like she's kind of a
Yep.
fucking psycho hacker.
Yeah, she went down the rabbit hole a little too far. I can understand that. Even with things in the clear net, as it's called, the regular internet,
Yeah.
you can get obsessed with things that are even there. Like I, for instance, I've gone down the rabbit hole on things that anybody could access.
And here's the disturbing part, right? Where's the control and the restraint here? Because the only thing stopping you from, continuing is yourself, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're doing this in private, there is no safeguard, right? Your AI is not going to say this is unhealthy, and I think that's where that joke. That's
Or
where that
tell you
joke.
a dad joke.
that was that was so funny, in a good way, in a
Yeah.
chilling way. It was like,
Right.
do you the ghost joke especially, um, and that's what makes her so paranoid that she she completely destroys it.
Right.
But
She's like, nope.
nope, this is completely wrong. But that being said, you said the only thing you had issues with were the opening scene, or was there anything else that you didn't like?
So really just any of the courtroom stuff other than like when they actually watch the stuff, the videos. Like I liked that. And
Courtroom
her
is
crazy
hard.
freak out where she dresses up, like I like that in the courtroom. But I feel
Mm,
like a lot of the courtroom stuff, like if it sort of feels almost like two different movies at points, where they're like it's
right.
like a courtroom drama, like it's like something off like CSI or something, where you're just like going through the motions. And it really like I understand that like it's a good build up and it explains like the story and all that, but it's to go back to a previous film we reviewed. It reminded me a lot of like Hitman, just like scenes that I necessarily aren't completely invested in. Like I'm wondering where it's going, and I'm getting more questions, but it's not doing anything for me.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think, I can only give you my personal opinion, but I think Courtroom
Mhm.
is tricky. It is hard, right? Because
Mhm.
it's let's face
Yeah,
it, there's nothing glamorous about courtrooms.
I was kind of curious. How do these courtroom scenes to completely sidetrack you? Joker 2, is this are they alike at all in any way?
Yeah, it's interesting because there is a lot of comparison, not to Joker 2, but maybe the first Joker.
Yeah. Taxi
But
driver.
I would say Joker 2's courtroom scenes are. I mean, the fact that we're comparing these two films is insane. First of all, because Joker 2 is a complete disaster.
Yeah,
But
no,
the
I had
scenes,
a random fleeting thought, and I just wanted to see what you would say.
it's good you brought it up because there is a link between
Mm,
the two, and I think, um because but they're both protagonists and they're both not necessarily meant to be. You root for them in a way, or you're watching them in
mm.
a way,
Right,
but you're not meant to like them, or you're not meant to like support the idea of what they're doing
right.
or what they achieve. But I would say no, absolutely not. Joker 2 is horrible. I mean, the court scenes in Joker 2 is a farce, and
Okay.
everything about that film is a disaster. I think
It's a
it's an insult.
kangaroo court.
I think it's an insult just to compare the compare this to the to Joker 2, because
Yeah,
Joker 2 is nothing. I mean, the court scenes in Joker 2 is not even relevant in a way. I
right.
mean, you could argue the whole film isn't relevant, but that's a
Right.
debate for
Well,
some
that's
other
just
day.
because the director wanted to just spit in the face of the
Oh
fans.
yeah, it was a
The
big fuck you.
hardcore, yeah, it was a
It was
big
a
fuck
big
you.
fuck you, and I'm kind of glad he managed to do it. I mean, good for him, because he must have felt really strongly about the reactions of incels, praising
Right.
Joker. Uh, but that's
Hey, I'm
good.
not an incel.
No, but there are many online. But that being said, I think I to get to the law part, not to drag this on, but I do think, like, look, the courtroom scenes, they're not meant to be glamorous,
No,
and I
that's
think
just
that's
kind of
where
bored.
I think we tend to watch a lot of stuff in media, where courtroom dramas are really juiced up, and really, you kind of see the lawyer and the prosecutor and the back and forth, and you see the
Mm.
the witness and all that, the jury, and it kind of creates this circus show for you to engage in. And there's another good movie that I would recommend called Jura number uh something, I forgot.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm the
Yeah, I think
the
you
Clint
talked to me
Eastwood
about it
Juror
previously.
number 8. Juror number 2. Sorry, I get confused with the numbers. Juror number 2 is again a good example of this. It's a great courtroom drama that's purely about courtroom drama.
Mm-hmm.
I think this film, the beauty of it is for me, it lures you in thinking it's a courtroom drama about a serial killer case, but it sidetracks and goes completely into the rabbit hole of this one protagonist who's associated in a weird way, not directly, and we get a peek inside her life and her obsession with this case and the killer. And I think that I quite like the fact that the killer wasn't represented in this way where he was being centered. I think it's centered more on the groupie character for sure, and then Kellyanne. And I think that is the message of what they tried to achieve was achieved because of that decision creatively. And yeah, you can argue. I would definitely agree. I think some of the court scenes are hard to get through. It is a trudge, especially when you're watching it for like 20 minutes straight and you're looking at slow zooms. But it's creating a really disorienting effect for a reason. And I think what's sickening is, it's making you as an audience feel disturbed, and that plays out better in the second half. For me, the second half really delivered more than I would argue the opening is slower and kind of lacks the energy it needs to get you in that sense. But it's intentional. It's creating this slow mood to hook you in a very disorienting way, and then it gets weirder and more grotesque as things goes on, but not visibly grotesque, which is interesting. But that being said, we can get into final. Or we've been rambling final thoughts anyway.
Yep. I'm ready.
You want to?
Yep. I'll shoot it. All right. Not to beat a dead horse. But I did enjoy the movie. I was a little bored in the courtroom. Not to beat a dead horse. A good chunk of the movie takes place there. I enjoy the character of Kellyanne. I thought she was very intriguing. I wish to know more about her. Every question I got answered, I felt like I got another question. I feel like there's a lot of those. That's another problem I have with it. But I did like how they ended it. The motherfucker gets he gets his Ludovic gets sentence, but it was a different court because she released more evidence and they completely sidetracked that court proceeding. The ending was satisfying enough. I feel like they could have just easily cut 30 minutes from the movie and it would have run a lot smoother for me. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that in terms of the ending, it sort of ends with the groupies, the Clementine's interview. I think we forgot to talk about that.
Yeah,
briefly,
she is like, oh, I fucked up.
It's interesting. A character you thought was irredeemable,
right?
Gets redemption, or not? Doesn't necessarily get redemption, but
right. She sees of her bad ways. Yeah,
owns up to her bad ways compared to our protagonist. That being said, I think for me, I can overlook the issues the film may have with its pacing, because I think ultimately for me the message is stronger and lands more effectively. I think the performance is amazing. Juliette Garapi is incredible in this, and I hope she gets cast in bigger movies and breaks out.
Be really cool if she spoke English.
She does. I'm sure she will if she has to. She can, and she's great. Her on-screen presence is great. So I do want to shout out to the performances, and of course the soundtrack and the direction for me was good, especially some of the staging with the camera work, with the actors. That being said, I think like I said, the message for me is stronger. I think it says a lot about our parasocial relationship with technology, with true crime as a subject, with AI, with all these other emerging trends in our life that are becoming increasingly prescient. And the message is so strong. I'm going to give it a strong 9 out of 10 for me. It was really impressive. And this film disturbed me without actually showing visible violence or gore, and it still disturbed me. So I think the idea of it, or what it sends through across the message, was strong enough for me to recommend it highly enough. But that being said, I mean, do you have a recommendation for our next episode?
Nope. It'll be a
Great.
nice surprise. We'll find out.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me, and that's goodbye from me.
See you, Space Cowboy.